It was a cold and windy afternoon in December 2018 that Tom Heaton and I ventured out in the hope of photographing lone trees in the drama of an atmospheric blizzard. Unfortunately, the anticipated snow never arrived, so after warming up in Tom's camper van, we decided to abandon the shoot and promised ourselves that we would one day return for a second attempt. From that moment on, we started to feel like our meetups were cursed, as time and time again, the elements seemed to conspire against us, until now. It may have taken us 5 years to complete this video, but it's been 7 years since I first visualised an image for the trees I'm about to revisit. As I said in a video in January 2018, perseverance pays off. This time we were rewarded with oodles of atmosphere and a perfect opportunity to revisit one of my favourite mythical beasts. Well, what a beautiful morning to revisit these trees. Like I said, about 5 years since Tom and I were last here, and probably a similar sort of time since I last visited these trees as well. So really good to be out. Tom and I were just saying actually how we're so used to being out on our own, and we do appreciate that solitude in nature, but every now and then it's very nice to go out and have a bit more of a social outing and inject a bit of fun into the process. So these trees behind me here, this trio of pines, is very familiar, so I wanted to revisit these, and particularly just to sort of see how things have changed over the course of the last few years. I can see there's definitely a little bit of change in character. I can't see growth, I can see more decay actually. The snapped branch on the far left, that's hanging down more. My favourite tree, known as Krampus, the big sort of fork that comes up and hanging down, was definitely more jagged before, but it sort of seems to have rotted and sagged a little bit, so that's interesting to see. But they're still standing, and that's the story that I've always wanted to capture with these, is a sense of endurance being exposed on the moortop to these quite harsh conditions. I mean, when we think of the storms that have come through in recent times, these trees will have been absolutely battered, and they're definitely showing that, definitely very weathered trees. So as it happens, after Tom and I last visited in December 2018, I was back only a month later in January 2019, and I made an image of one of these pine trees here known as Krampus. Now, some of you won't have seen that image before, so I'll show it on screen now. I'm not expecting it, but I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that we get a very heavy flurry, because that heavy flurry, that's feeling of a blizzard, is what I've always wanted for these trees. And what, they must be sort of 6-7 years later now, and I still haven't seen it. It will have happened, I've just not been fortunate enough to be here when it has. How perfectly apt that we're approaching Christmas time and I get to revisit one of my favourite mythical beasts, an image that I called Krampus. So like I said, this was in January 2019. I didn't video at the time, I just wanted to concentrate on the photography. I don't think I'm going to improve necessarily upon the image I made back then. It's a very kind of simple composition, but I've got some other things to bear in mind this time. So if you've not heard of Krampus, the story is that Krampus is this mythical beast that scares the naughty children at Christmas time. There's actually a film called Krampus, a horror film. I'm not going to recommend it, it's pretty terrible. It maybe stretches the story a little bit too far. But it brings me back to something that I've talked about in the past, is that if you come across a particularly characterful tree or a woodland scene, and you can think of these scenarios, these metaphors, then they can have an influence upon how you compose the image in the field. And it gives more intent, it gives structure to your workflow. And I have some different things to contend with this time, because when I initially made the photograph of Krampus, the fog was denser. So the only tree I could see in the background is the one just to the left of it. It's still dense, but it's definitely thinner today. So I can see more trees further back. Because of that, I can't position the camera the same as what I did before. I'm having to move a lot closer. And the reason for that is so that I can separate Krampus out from the tree on the right hand side. Otherwise, some of its lovely bare bones branches are going to merge into that background tree. However, the benefit of moving closer is that I'm having to look up at Krampus, and it's giving it that more kind of domineering effect, which is what I liked in the first instance. Because if I've got this mythical beast that goes around punishing naughty children, then it has to have a lot of dominance in the frame to show off that character the way that it kind of almost looks quite aggressive towards that tree on the left hand side in the background with its bony branches, the way it just leans over and it looks very dominant over that background tree. It works really, really well, and actually because we've got that bare bones branch on the right hand side as well, the way that hangs down and looks a little bit, you know, menacing towards the tree in the background, it's giving off it, you know, all the vibes of what Krampus should have. And I'd add to that the mood, the atmosphere. It's just lovely when all these elements come together, not just so that the tree fits the metaphor, the scenario, but the conditions fit that too. That's why I always have these long-term goals. You know, I visualize a scene and what I want in terms of compositionally, but also what conditions, what elements need to fit with that. Really nice, really, really good. You know, I always sort of treat trees as friends, and the fact that I've not been to see this friend for about 4 to 5 years, I think a revisit was long overdue. By pure coincidence, the day before our shoot was the annual Krampus Run in Whitby. I thought it'd be fun to show a bit of context to Krampus, but the point is that we can find inspiration and ideas from the most unexpected of places when we're always mindful of our photographic interests. You've seen me anthropomorphise trees since my very first video 7 years ago, and that imagination can be sparked by movies, perhaps your inner world, or even when watching a street parade in homage to a half-goat, half-demon monster. Folktales and legends, your childhood experiences and lessons in adulthood can inspire an imagination that adds to the transportative enjoyment of woodland photography. Embrace it and feel like a kid again, but a well-behaved one, of course. Tom's disappeared into the abyss. Hope he doesn't get lost. Now I just want to quickly point out something which I've given advice on before, but then today I've made a mistake myself. So when you're photographing in snow, it always makes sense to stay a lot further back from the things that you're photographing, and as soon as you've exhausted all the opportunities and kind of surveyed the area, then slowly move forward so that you're not disturbing the snow that you might potentially want in your image. I've kind of done that here because I stepped further back and I thought, oh, I wonder if I could include this tree that's just above my head. But you can see down here, that's where I was stood to photograph Krampus, and I've disturbed all the snow in that heather. So it's kind of, you know, it makes it disrupts that nice clean quality along the foundation of the image. I don't think it's of great consequence because, to be fair, the image back here, although it's quite a nice arrangement of trees, it doesn't capture what Krampus is about, because all of a sudden Krampus looks a little bit feeble compared to this tree that's much closer and appears to look much larger. So, but it's something to bear in mind because it can make a decent image in its own right. It just doesn't have the kind of narrative of the other one, which I really enjoy. Well, how nice to get a new angle of Krampus. Same two trees. I'm kind of feeling a bit sorry for this one in the background. Poor little fellow's getting bullied by this beast. But this is a really nice interaction as well. It's just like these skeletal branches are just reaching out and striking down on this one in the background. And even though these characters are Krampus is very menacing, because of the stillness, the fog, that serenity, that peace and quiet, I think it's important to give it some breathing room so we still get that sense of isolation coming through and calmness. And most of my woodland, unless I'm capturing the movement of the wind, it doesn't matter what I'm photographing, I tend to have that sense of calm and serenity, because generally that's why I'm in the woods in the first place, is to experience that. So yeah, I really like this angle actually. Again, looking up at Krampus, so we get that sense of it being quite dominant, even though it's probably not as tall as the one in the background. Just the altered perspective that we're using is making it look much bigger. And the interaction between the two, the subtle spacing between the two, it works really, really well. It's amazing just how similar these conditions are to when I was here in January 2019, because as well as that dusting of snow and the fog, in the pine needles there, that is frost as well, which is really, because if that was just dark green pine needles, it just wouldn't have the same effect. But the fact that we've got some detail and luminosity in there is going to really add to the appeal of the high key approach that I'll take in the editing process. Right, thank you Krampus. That is me done. I bid you farewell. And Tom's back, looking warm. I haven't really moved from, I'm kind of slightly obsessed with my Krampus character, so I've been taking a few different angles. I say a few different angles, small variations, but this is my second angle.
Yeah, I destroyed my composition with the big track running right through the middle.
Oh, I was literally just talking about that, because I mean, I stepped back to take a photograph and realised I had all this in the foreground.
I was like, oh, it didn't even occur to me, because I only ever worry about that in fresh snow.
Yes,
when it's on the heather, you don't really notice it until you look behind you. There's a big black line.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What you doing? Who's a good girl? Come on. Do-do-do. Well, very nice. Have you photographed this one?
Yeah.
Ah. To be fair, I typically don't like to photograph trees which other people have already photographed because I think the value in photography is in the artist's eye and the original composition that they've come up with. We should hold a lot of value in that originality, I think. However, Tom and I are friends, we're just out for the fun of it. I've not seen the photograph that he's made of this tree, so I'm just having a quick go as well. Now, normally, if I'm photographing a tree, I like to explore it from all angles, tease out the composition that shows the very best that tree has to offer. But this time, I'm just working very impulsively. I just walked around, spotted an angle, and I thought that could work. So I'm just going with it and see how it turns out. So over on the far right-hand side, you can just make out a pine tree. The fog's become denser, so it's almost disappeared now. I might have an image where we can see a little bit more detail of it, where I've positioned it in a gap in the branches. So we've got these drapes of branches hanging down, there's a little gap there, and I just wanted to include it as a secondary component to offer a little bit of, well, a sense of place, but an opportunity to include a little bit of space as well. Down at the base we've got the bracken, dying bracken and the heather, and then we've got this open area of snow which leads down to the warm trunk of this birch tree. Lots and lots of complexity and intricate branches in this birch tree. We've got the witch's broom feature as well. There's just a tiny bit of movement in it, but generally very, very still. Hopefully that fog will just thin out just a little bit so I can get a bit more of that pine tree in the background. But yeah, not a bad image. I don't think this fog is going to thin out anytime soon, so I'll just leave it at that. There's no point lingering here for too much longer. I think we're going to move on and see if we can find a different area, and hopefully we'll find some more mist, frost and snow. If you've enjoyed this video, then please consider buying a copy of the Trees for Life 2024 calendar. Not only does it help to support my photographic and video endeavours, but proceeds also help to support nature's recovery in the Scottish Highlands. Trees for Life have been bringing innovation to conservation for over 25 years, so please follow the link in the description below to buy your calendar and help to support their groundbreaking work and this channel too. We thank you very much for your kind support. Okay, that is us done for the day, I think. Tom needs to get back, he has other engagements, but we've finally broken the curse. I mean, the amount of times that Tom and I have been out hoping to produce a video together and everything's been against us, the weather, timing, etc. So I think we both have footage in the archive that's never been used, so it's nice to actually... Tom's throwing snowballs at me. Ouch. It's not a very good shot. No doubt he'll probably hit the camera instead of me. Oh God. So anyway, before I get smacked in the face with an icy snowball, I just say thank you very much for watching this episode, and I'll be back again soon. Thanks again.